Okay, good morning. We are on live with a friend of mine, Jen Babakhan. I just want to thank you for getting up early and meeting me on Facebook Live.
Yes, absolutely. So happy to be here.
So I was able to meet Jen. Well, I actually found her Facebook page just from mutual friends that liked on it, and then I was able to meet her in person in California last year at a speakers conference, and I was really impressed with Jen because we both shared a passion, and that was that we were both able to stay at home with our kids. And I'm having Jen on today because she just came out with a book. It's newly released, Detoured, and it's a messy, grace-filled journey from working professional mom to stay-at-home mom. And I wanted Jen to come on and talk with us today because Jen's on one end and I'm on the other end. She is a stay-at-home mom with little ones, and I am a stay-at-home mom empty nest. So that's a different title. But as I read her book, I just kept nodding and nodding and nodding and saying, man, I wish this had been a resource when I was younger and had, this to rely on, because there were so many things that she just verbalized that I felt and actually still feel with the title of Stay-at-Home Mom. So Jen, welcome. I would love for you to give us a little background on where this book came from and also your story.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here this morning. Basically, I graduated college with a degree in communication studies, PR, mass media, and went into marketing from there. After spending a few years in marketing, I realized that God was calling me into the classroom, which really felt like my first love. I always felt like I was meant to be a teacher. And so when I started teaching third grade, it felt like such a wonderful fit and like where I was absolutely meant to be. And so when I got pregnant with my first son, I absolutely expected to take my maternity leave and jump right back into the classroom and pick up where I left off. What happened instead was I held my baby for the first time and felt like there is no way I can go back to work. And so although that was my instinctual reaction, I still felt some struggle with that decision. And it was made a lot easier for me when my son developed a milk protein sensitivity, which required that I really monitor his diet, which at the time was breast milk and some hypoallergenic formula. And I just I couldn't trust anybody else to do that. Being a first-time mom and feeling anxious about all the things anyway, it really felt like it was a no-brainer that I needed to stay home. So when I resigned, I had a lot of mixed feelings that I did not expect to have. I assumed that giving up my career would be the easiest thing in the world because I was going to be home with this baby that I loved more than life itself. But again, what happened instead was that I experienced a lot of mixed emotions and shame for feeling anything other than just elation. And so God really took me on a journey. And what ultimately happened is that he led me to write about it because I knew that I couldn't be the only one that felt this way. And so, yeah, that's why Detoured came about.
It's such a great book. And you're right. You're not the only one that felt that way. In fact, we're going to welcome Jennifer Bryant all the way from Hawaii watching us right now.
Hi, Jennifer.
And Mark so glad you guys are here. It was, you have this ideal before you're able to quit your job of what stay at home means. And then when you actually do, and it's not what you thought it would be.
Right.
Some days you don't even enjoy it. You actually feel guilty that you're able to stay at home with these kids and you're just wishing you could, be back at work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things that I struggled with for many years, and that you mentioned in the book that I like, that you actually felt like bad for not financially contributing to the home, and that you felt like you were spending his money.
Right.
Which I completely related to, and sometimes, honestly still do. But I loved your husband's response, which you can share with us in a second here. But I think a lot of moms that are working from home um, get sidetracked with the actual financial thought process of it, because they don't see the results of what they're contributing and what they're actually investing in. But now that I am on the other end of that time, I look back at actually how much it would have cost to have someone full time in the home doing what we did, and also, what we're investing in. And so, society, and like you were mentioning when we talked personally, society and the media keep telling women what the levels of success should look like and what that success is, and the term balancing and all of that. So I admire your husband's, which I'd like you to share his viewpoint on the financial thing. But what are your thoughts and advice for women that are actually torn between the two worlds of staying at home and working, and financial contributions?
Yeah, sure. The financial part of it is something that was really unexpected for me. It kind of hit me out of nowhere after I had resigned and realized that, obviously I knew my paycheck was going away, but I did not realize how much of my worth and my value I had assigned to being able to bring in that paycheck every month. And so, for me, I write about it, I talk about it in the book, is that I went on this crazy job application spree for every job that I could find where I could work from home. I was so desperate to bring in any source of income, not necessarily to help out the family, but just so I could buy my fancy makeup without it feeling any sense of guilt, or I could, buy myself a coffee without feeling any sense of guilt. There was so much of my ability to bring home an income that led to me feeling just this lack of worth in my family. What was I having to show for the work that I was doing? My husband was bringing home this check every month, and he was providing for our meals and our utilities and our house payment and our car payments. And what was I doing? And when it really came down to the core of it, when he saw me, striving to find a work from home job, he was like, what are you doing this for? What you're offering to our home is so valuable. And this money that I'm bringing in is not my money. This is our money. This is our family money. You still have the freedom to purchase anything for yourself that you want or you need. This is not a money thing. And so when I finally realized that it was not a money thing, and that was a hard thing for me to swallow. It was a really hard thing for me to swallow, that I was no longer contributing financially to our family, but I was contributing in other ways. And so when I was able to really take stock of, okay, what we were going to be paying in daycare was an astronomical amount. I once read this article, and I wish I could think of who to attribute it to, but the writer in the article said, the gifts that I'm giving my spouse by staying home is that, he never has to worry about who's going to take the baby to the doctor, who's going to take off time to, make sure that the baby's taken care of, or this or that. And so the simple stress relief for our spouses of not having to worry about anything because we've already got it, it's huge. But I really had to come to a place where I could take ownership of it. And it wasn't something that I was pushing away or something that I was in denial about. I had to really own all of it. Yes, I'm staying at home. No, I'm not bringing in an income, but what I'm doing has value. And I have value even if there's not a paycheck tied to my name.
I love that. And I like Jennifer Bryant was saying, it's difficulty for us to find value beyond money.
Yes.
I like that. And that goes right into one of the things you mentioned in your book, which I love. Often we look for value in the title.
Yes.
And so I know, and I used to get, and I still do get the question, so what do you do? And like I mentioned earlier, that's when I used to say, well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And I wish I could go back to my younger self and give myself the, you know, self-worth belief that, and just say, yeah, I work from home or I work in the home.
Right.
Because I got a lot of, and I don't know if you get these or if other women watching get these, sometimes I would get comments, must be nice to be retired, or wow, you worked so hard on your degree that don't you feel like you're wasting it? And so a lot of times I felt like I had to justify, you
Mm-hmm.
know, things. But I do remember one time hearing someone say, well, when I quit my job, I was replaced the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't be replaced one day in my child's life. And so looking at your value in that light. And you also mentioned in that same chapter where you talk about titles that, you know, when we realize who we are in Christ, we can stop striving for the approval in the achievements or approval and achievements, and just realize that we're worthy and loved. Um, you know, now as an empty nester, I'm still starting to get the question, so now what do you do?
Right.
And so it's a never ending struggle for our value in the title. So you mentioned one thing, and I want you to talk about it, about the titles and unpacking that thought process.
Absolutely. You know, those comments from others are unfortunately not uncommon. I think we've all kind of gotten those comments either from former colleagues or, you know, people that we run into. They're, you know, if we're not careful, those can just kind of set up camp in our hearts and in our minds, and it becomes something that gets under our skin that can just kind of irk us. And you know, I think it's one of those things where when we think about our careers and what we gave up and going to college and our education and whether it's wasted, I don't believe that education is ever wasted. I can tell you that I have absolutely used my education in being home with my children, you know, and thinking, you know, drawing on those experiences of the past and how that I you know, interact with them and all of that. I mean, anybody that's ever taken a business class with negotiation knows that they will be using those skills with a toddler or, you know, or a 5-year-old. You know, you're for sure going to be using those negotiation skills. So I say in the book that you know, Jesus isn't interested in our titles. He's interested in the titles that we allow him to hold in our lives. And for me, this entire process was a stripping away of external titles until I got down to the absolute core of who I was in Christ. And that's his daughter, and nothing else matters. You know, I make it sound like it was just this quick process of, okay, and now I realize who I am and it's all good. But it was 2 years of struggle. It was 2 years of allowing Jesus to strip everything away. It was ugly. It was messy. It was bumpy. It was all the things. But something beautiful was born of that. And that was an unshakable faith of in who I am in him, and realizing that there is no title that can be given to me on this earth that is more important than the one that I have in Christ. There's no title that's ever going to reach that. And so when you know that at your core, and when that is a message that's been given to you by Christ, the words of others no longer have the same sting. They no longer have the same opportunity in your life to settle in the same way. You know, now when I see other moms that are receiving those same comments, you know, we were talking earlier about someone that talked about Detoured and what it's meant to her, and she received you know, a commenter saying, you know, well, it's nice for you that you had the option. And I know that you know, prior to this journey that God took me on, those kinds of comments were really hurtful. now I look at it as that's coming from that person's, own place. And that doesn't have to be where I am. And I don't have to accept that as something that's truth in my life, because the only truth that matters is who I am in Christ, period.
Yes, I love that. And like you mentioned, the comment is coming from where that person is. And, Jen and I talked a little bit before we went live, and she mentioned something that I think is true, that there's a self-perceived mom wars. And Jen by no means on this book is saying that one mom is more valuable than another mom. And I think that those comments come from hurt or a belief that society has put on moms that are staying at home and moms that are unable to. And I really know, coming from Jen's heart, that this is her story of the choice she made and what it has meant to her. But what do you say to maybe the mom that reads this book and feels that there's a mom war?
Yeah, I often wonder if mom wars really exist, because what I see in my day-to-day life is that we all have an understanding. I say in the book that we may fight different battles, but we are all battling. And so a working, mom's struggles are going to look different from mine, and my struggles are going to look different from hers. Neither one of us is doing any more or less for our children. We all love our children the same. We all want our children to succeed. And I personally have not, witnessed a true mom war scenario. I think that sometimes the media likes to, make it into this big thing about, working moms versus stay-at-home moms, when in actuality, we're all doing what's best for our family, and we're all just doing the best that we can. And so, I more often than not have seen moms giving grace to one another. Yes. and trying to serve one another in whatever ways they need to serve. I talk about in the book, if we're a stay-at-home mom, then we need to support our working outside the home moms. If their sick leave runs out and they need someone to watch their child, then we can volunteer for that. If they can't make it to, a soccer practice and they need their kid to be dropped off, then we should volunteer to do that for them. I think that so much of the community that motherhood used to be, we used to have these rock solid communities with mothers helping one another, and there wasn't the same level of loneliness or isolation. And I think society will always try to pull us apart and pit us against each other, but that's not the truth. And certainly, we are the ones that get to decide if there's any truth to that or not. And so I think it is one of those things where, the mom wars don't have to be a reality. They don't have to be a reality in our lives, in our communities. We can make the difference for one another and show our support no matter what our occupation is.
Amen. And that's our faith call, is Absolutely. That. I love that. Thank you so much. Well, as you know, I talk to women. I love to speak with women that are in a transition. You went from a transition, and at my end, we're going through a transition, either full nest to empty nest, or full-time work to retirement. And a lot of women place their value in a role, and those roles can change or be taken from us. But in chapter 7 of your book, you talk about finding your way back to you. As wives and mothers, a lot of times we put the needs of our children and our husbands before us, which I'm not saying that is bad, but it is important not to lose sight of the purpose that we have. And part of that purpose is self-care. And you talked about co-creating, which I love that, and investing in who they are as a mom. Because if we do that all along, I think through those transitions, it'll be easier for us to know that we still have value, still have purpose. Can you talk a little bit about self-care as a mom? Because we feel bad about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to remove the idea that self-care is a bubble bath or a manicure. I think we have to just take that out of the equation and realize that's something else. Okay.
Yeah.
Self-care has gotten this, it's real trendy right now to talk about self-care, but I think maybe what's more accurate is to talk about soul care.
Ooh,
and we are meant to be more than only mothers. And so that is certainly a role that we have. That is certainly a gift that we have in this life. But I don't believe that's the only reason we've been put here. And so I really think it is so vital that we realize that as followers of Christ, we are here on a mission, and our giftings and all of that play into how we live out that mission and what that looks like for each of us. And so in that chapter, I really encouraged women to think about who they were and what they enjoyed before they had kids, because it gets lost under the dirty piles of laundry.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, who has time? Who has time to sit around and think about, whatever. But I think it's so vital to really think about what was it that you really used to enjoy. I point moms back to looking at what they love to play as a child, because I think what it is that you enjoyed as a child will often point you in the direction of something that you probably will still enjoy or something that you're gifted in. So when I look back at my own life, I love to write and I love to teach. I love to play school. So, I talk about the fact that I would make my friends line up as students and I was the teacher giving a lecture, and I am sure that it was absolute joy to come to my house to play.
That play date.
I know, God bless them. I'm sure they were like, I am so glad to get out of this house and go home. So those were things that I did, a lot as a kid. And so I realize now that my giftings in teaching or my giftings in writing have always been a part of me. And truly, it's something that God has put in my heart that is something that I love to do. And so there's something like that for each woman. There's something like that for each mom. If she can look back to what were those things that I really, really love to do, that I would do just because I wanted to, even if I didn't get paid for it. This is something that I was interested in or something I was curious about. That's going to go a long way to helping you figure out what are some things that you can add into your life now that are going to help to round you out a little bit. So you're not just about changing diapers and washing dishes and laundry and soccer practice and all of those things, but what is it that is going to make you feel like you're co-creating with God on something on a larger scale, that's more mission oriented?
Yeah. And applying that all through the lives of your children. Like you said, I love that. Look back to something you enjoyed as a kid that made you feel free or made you feel, excited and happy, and try to implement areas of that. Like you said, you liked to write. Looking back, I liked to write too. And I found that as I was with my kids and going with them along at each level, I would start writing lesson plans for their church school. And that made me feel fulfilled. That made me feel valuable. And so I and it really wasn't published, but it was a way for me to, do some self-care and still feel like you mentioned, co-creating. I really like that process. Also, you'll find a lot of times what you loved doing as a little kid is what the plan and purpose God placed in you, and it just grows with you and becomes different at different levels. But and it continues even when you're not in that role. So I really like acknowledging that self-care is not just, like you said, a bubble bath.
Right. Absolutely.
Soul care. I like that thought processes. And so as we're wrapping up, if there's any questions you guys have, I have some good friends visiting on here. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the time, Mindy and Denise and Sonia, for joining on here. And if you have any questions, put them on. But we're going to talk about the end of the book, Beauty in the Balance. For me, that tied back into the title mindset, because I often felt that a stay-at-home mom needed to be busy to be justified at staying home. Like if I wasn't busy and I had any downtime, then I wasn't keeping up my end of the deal. And
Right.
we feel like failures sometimes if we aren't keeping up with the way we think things ought to be. And you tell us that your family needs us to just be living out our purpose. And I totally agree. And how have you been able to find balance, be okay with self-care, and be who God intended you to be all at once?
Yeah, I talk about it in the book a lot about how I really swung from one end of the spectrum to the other. So when I first resigned and I was a stay-at-home mom, I had these checklists that I would check off about, I had, Mondays I did laundry, and Tuesdays I did the floors, and Wednesdays was bathroom days. And, so I had all of this regimen, and there was no room for any grace for myself in it at all. I was just going to get through everything. The house was going to be spotless. I was going to check everything off the list, and we were all going to live happily ever after. And that led to such a level of burnout, and I just had lost all the joy that I was hoping to find as a stay-at-home mom. There was no room for joy. It was all work all the time because I had to earn the privileges of being home. And I had to feel like I was holding up my end of the bargain. If I wasn't bringing home a paycheck, then my goodness, the house was going to be spotless, and I was going to hold up my end of the bargain here. And eventually I had to learn that that's not sustainable. It's not enjoyable. My child, I'm sure I was not a fun mom to live with, that I was just stressed out all the time about keeping an orderly home and this and that. And so I really had to come through that time, it was by God's grace and God's work in my heart that I could allow myself the grace to just be. And so the balance, I sometimes feel like it can be an illusion, but I think we can work towards finding something that works for our family. And it's going to look different in every season of life, and it's going to look different for every family. So this season, while I'm trying to launch this book and spread the word about it, my life right now looks a little off balance because I'm spending a lot of time, doing things like this or working to pitch podcasts or do whatever. And so it doesn't look like it's in balance right now. But I know that this is for a season, this is temporary, and I know what it generally looks like in our home and in our family. And I'm able to give grace to myself in this season because I know that it won't always look like this. And so I think that's the main thing, is just finding that grace for yourself to know that it's great when everybody feels fulfilled and everybody's getting their needs met and you feel fulfilled and all of that. That's a wonderful place to be when everybody's just moving along, at cruising altitude, everybody's good. But giving grace to yourself when you're going to have those inevitable times when things are in balance, because you're going to have things that pop up in life. You're going to have a sick parent that needs your attention. You're going to have work-related stress with your spouse or whatever that's going to take attention here or there. But just giving yourself grace and knowing that eventually you'll come back to that comfortable balance again. But it was a real process for me to even find it to begin with, because I was just striving so hard to make sure that I earned the right to be home. Wow. So yeah, God did a lot of work on me during that time.
Yes. And I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day
thank you for having me.
I want to pitch again, because this book, when you first hear about it, you might think, well, I'm empty nest and it's not for me, but it has so many awesome, I don't even know what the word, it just has so many awesome points. So many awesome words. I kept saying, oh my word, I still feel that way on an emptiness side. And especially, understanding who I am in Christ. So it's not just a book for young moms of young kids. It is for older people. And also, I would say as a gift to young moms in your church. One way I think that those of us on this other end still have a purpose to mentor and to love and uplift the young moms in our church. We still have a purpose to reach these ladies and let them know they're loved and help them out. So I just, thank you so much for obeying the call and writing. And if you guys have any questions, you can find Jen on her website that I've listed here. Again, her book is Detoured, and you can continue on the thread and share this video with anyone you feel could use it. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy, and I really appreciate all you're doing for the moms that you come into contact. I know from the minute that we met, you were just such a kind heart and so passionate about helping, other moms that are in the trenches. And so I'm very appreciative for the opportunity. So thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye. Whew.